Okay, good evening, everybody. We are moving on to the next stage in the Gemara, a little bit away from Tumas Kalim. And the Mishnah had said after the Rashi had said Ein pochatin et haner mepnei shu asa kli, that we dealt with, and now the next part of the Mishnah is Ein osin pachamim biyom tov. So a person is not allowed to go ahead and make these coals on Yom Tov. So we saw Rashi on the Mishnah says the Ein osin pachamim de'inu nami kli ninhu litzorfei zahav. These coals are also considered kalim, just like we had with the issue of the nair. So these are considered kalim. How so? Litzorfei zahav for the blacksmiths who have to go ahead and use it to melt and bend metal. Uptila nami klihi. Also the last case, the seif of the Mishnah about going ahead and cutting the wick. That's also making it a kli. Lahadlaka shetzricha asiyat asiya v'tikun. You have to go ahead and you have to form and cut the wick appropriately. So that is also considered as a kli. So that was Rashi on the Mishnah giving us some background. Okay. We jump back into the Gemara. Gemara says, quotes the, interesting, there's no two dots here or anything like that, but the Gemara goes ahead and quotes the Mishnah, Ve'ein osin pechamim. So Gemara says, Pshita, of course you can't make these coals on Yom Tov. Lamai chazi, what are you going to use them for? Why would you think what's the havamina that you can go ahead and use these coals for anything? So the Gemara says, Tani Rebbe Chia lo nitzrocha ela lemoserin yarin. The Tana, we only needed to teach this. We only needed to teach this the Mishnah that you can't make these coals on Yom Tov for lemosrin yarin. Right? What is that? Those are the right. Rashi says yarin mechami chamin u'merchatzot. So these were the bathhouses. They used to go ahead and they would warm them up with coals, and therefore, so you're not allowed to go ahead. So the Gemara is saying, the Mishnah is stating that you're not allowed to go ahead and make the coals for the bathhouses. So the Gemara immediately jumps on this and it says, well, one second. Uboba yom mishari? Who allows you to go ahead and make coals, use coals to warm up water for the bathhouses on Shabbat, on Yom Tov, on Yom Tov. Rashi explains, Umi Shari, let's make this a little bigger. Umi Shari, lachem, to go ahead and heat it up. Bahalo gazru ala rachitza b'mesechet Shabbat. Va'afilu huchma miva'od yom. V'chol shachen lachem chamin lo huter me'olam. So Gemara in Masechet Shabbat tells us that there was a slew of gzerot that they made regarding the bathhouses. Originally, so Mikra Adin, originally they had, you were allowed to go ahead and use a bathhouse on Shabbat, so long as the coals, the water was heated, basically, forget the coals, the water was heated from before Shabbat. So use water that was heated before Shabbat on Shabbat, Mikra Adin, used to be fine. What happened? People were lying. People were pulling a fast one on the Rabbanim, and they were going ahead and they were saying that they were using a bathhouse from water that was heated before Shabbat, and really, in fact, it was heated on Shabbat itself. That's what the people of the bathhouses were doing, the owners of the bathhouses. So the rabbi said, okay, no more using the bathhouse on Shabbat, even if the water was heated from before Shabbat. Then what happened? The next stage in the Gzera was people were going to the bathhouses and they were saying that they're not bathing in them; they're just using it as a sauna, to kind of sweat, and that was okay. But in fact, what were they doing? They were bathing in them. So the rabbi said, okay, fine, no more using it as a sauna, no more using it as a steam room. That's also prohibited because people were basically lying. Then they went ahead and people were using, but they still weren't gozer on Chamei Tveria, the hot water springs of Tveria. That was still fine. So what was what's the next stage in the Gezerah? People were going ahead and they were going to the bathhouses and they were saying they were using Chamei Tveria, and in fact that's not what was happening at all. So they went ahead and they made a Gezerah also on Chamei Tveria. Eventually that was a Gezerah that the Tzibor could not stand by. They couldn't handle not using the hot waters of Tveria, so the rabbis actually retracted that part of the Gezerah, that you were allowed to use Chamei Tveria in the end, but everything before that they were gozer remained. So that's what the Gemara is asking now. It says, you're telling me that this is to say that I'm not allowed to make the coals to go ahead and use them for the bathhouses? Even though the bathhouses, that's not going to be mutter because there is a gzera against it. Right? Mishari, it's prohibited. So the Gemara answers, no. Kida'ama Rava lazia v'kodem gzera, hachanami lazia v'kodem gzera. This is making reference to a Gemara in Brachot, where Rava, having some type of contradiction there, Rava made a distinction that a certain instance, a certain situation happened in between the Gzeras. It happened after they were gozer on Beit HaMerchatz of using the hot water, even if it was heated up before, but before the stage where they made the Gzera on using it to sweat as a sauna. So here too, hachanami lahazia v'kodem gzera, meaning that according to the Gemara, at this point in the Gemara, the Mishnah was taught at a certain specific historical time, after they made the gzera that you can't use a Beit Merchatz, a bathing house on Shabbat for bathing, but on Yom Tov, but you can still use it for sweating. After that, there were gozer also on sweating, but this is a specific point in between, and that's what the Mishnah is telling me. You can't make coals for even that purpose. Adkan, we're okay. All right, there should be a lot of questions. Anybody have any questions here? This is because there's some funny stuff going on here.
Just a simple question: how does the editor of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, incorporate a Mishnah that was out of date by the time he put all the Mishnayos together?
Excellent question. It's actually a historical question. We do have that sometimes. We have a Mishnah Rishona. Sometimes the Gemara will bring the Mishnah will bring either the Mishnah itself or the Gemara will bring a Mishnah, a Beitza from elsewhere, and bring a contradiction, and the Gemara will say Mishnah Rishona, that this was a previously taught one, but it's kind of null and void. Why did Rebbe include things that changed? It's a good question. It's a better question than I have an answer for.
I think the answer might be that the Gezerah was just for that particular door. Those Shah, just this remained to be valid halacha after the fact, after that generation, maybe.
That the Gezerah was only, the problem is that we see that it's in this case they see that at least it's not true, that the Gezerah does stand, right? Even nowadays, So
question remains.
It's a good question though. Okay. Any other questions on this? Because
was there any issue at all about drying? It never came into it. I thought that's why you don't swim on Shabbos.
Good. So drying. So the whole issue of showering, both on Shabbat, bathing. I'll say bathing instead of showering. I think that's more accurate. Of bathing on Shabbat and Yom Tov really went through a lot of stages, as we saw the Gemara in Shabbat in terms of the Gzerot, but it even extends past the Gemara. Right? There was a minhag Ashkenaz, at least a minhag Ashkenaz already brought in the Rishonim about even bathing in cold water. Because even according to the Mishnayot and the Gemara, in terms of the Gezerah of using hot water, so all of that was a concern that maybe somebody was going to heat up water, but there was no Gezerah against using cold water. If someone wanted to go ahead and take a bath in cold water,
right,
the Gemara is totally fine. come the Ashkenazi Rishonim, and they start mentioning that the minhag develops in Ashkenaz not to use cold water.
Right.
Now it's hard to say if that was halachic reason or just because it was in Ashkenaz and it was freezing, and who in the right mind would use cold water? How often do they shower anyways? Just wait, why do I have to use cold water on Shabbat? So it's kind of like, you're right. They had a minhag not to bathe in cold water, but they also had a minhag not to bathe at all. So what does that mean? It's not
Well, wasn't that the machlokes, the Vilna Gaon and the Hasidim about using mikveh on Shabbos?
Oh, good. So mikvah comes into that, because if we're going to talk a little bit about that actually also. I mean, not the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim, but mikvah comes into that, because how can you go ahead and dunk into cold water? We're actually going to learn the Gemara. Excellent that you mentioned that now. Good. So we're going to see why mikvah might be different. We're going to see that Gemara. So that kind of developed over time. In terms of other issues, in terms of schita might happen either with a towel or with someone's hair. Schita, squeezing out liquid, can also apply to hair. All of these issues, theoretically, a person can get around them, right? If you're allowed to use a towel to dry something off, so long as the towel is big enough. If the towel is small, like let's say, I have kids, it happens all the time, you have spills on the floor. So you're allowed to clean up the spill, but you have to clean it up with a towel which is appropriate size. A little hand towel for a big spill, somebody's gonna come to the melacha of schita, and that would be problematic. So to use a big towel, even let's say somebody for reasons that maybe we'll talk about, is allowed to go ahead and shower on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Let's say Yom Tov. Nowadays, many poskim, we'll talk about this also maybe, that you can shower on Yom Tov, even with hot water perhaps. We'll have to discuss that. So you can use a towel so long as the towel is big enough. So you can get around those issues. Swimming is more of a gzera against, because maybe someone will build a raft. Now, I know that sounds crazy. Who's gonna maybe build a raft? So a couple of things. First of all, the gzera really only applies to open bodies of water, like an open beach. It doesn't really apply to swimming pools. So Maker Adin, a swimming pool should be okay to swim in. It should be okay to swim in. The whole thing, I think it's probably the laughed upon gzera ever. You're telling me I'm going to build a raft? Are you joking? Why would I ever build? Who builds a raft? But
I thought it was shvus as well.
What?
I thought it was shvus as well.
You thought it was, sorry?
Shvus as well.
Shvus?
Because it's not Shabbos day.
Oh, yeah. So it's right, exactly. But in terms of gzera building a raft, first of all, I know people that I like. Probably it's because we live in 2021. So like, who builds anything? You just go to IKEA and you buy a new one if it breaks. But like back in the day, I know people, not a lot, but I know a friend. Like if I put him, if I left him by the beach for a couple hours, he'd probably find some sticks and something and build something. He's like that type of guy. And like back in the day, everybody was like that. So you might actually go ahead and build a raft. But that aside, how did we get into this? I don't even remember. Lots of water everywhere today.
Talking about swimming in the pool, but we're talking about showering on Yom Tov.
Right.
Brother Kropkin is maturist. Before you say anything, go against him. I just want to let you know.
No, I'm glad to hear that that's what he holds.
As you said, there are a lot of heterim for that.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that as well. Pretty much all American Rabbanim or Matzah. I shouldn't say that, but okay. So let's get into it. We jumped all over the place and we make some seder here.
Can I ask a question? When you do this, it says you make a kli. What kind of kli are you making with the what do you call it?
With the coal?
What kind of kli are you making?
So there are different types of kalim. When we think of a kli nowadays, like in our modern terms, we think of something like an actual utensil, like a bowl.
Right.
And that's what we spoke about last time. We have a kli which has a beit kibul. It has some type of containing area. But that does not necessarily have to be what a kli is. A kli can be anything which has some type of melacha or use that can be done with it. Right? Like a knife doesn't have it has a functionality. I could do something with the knife. So a coal, if I form it into a coal, so then I have has a function, right? It can go ahead and keep a fire and burn things and do all kinds of stuff. So, okay, so we saw Rashi. Rashi said the issue here is you're making it into a kli, the tzorfei zahav. Now, it's almost like it's like an obvious question, but it's like one of those obvious questions that seems so obvious that it slides under the radar a little bit. And the Pnei Yeshua asks it. He says, Pnei Yeshua in source number 2. Mishna enosin pachamim. Perish Rashi dino nami klinenu litzorfei zav. So Rashi says, like we quoted, in terms of you're making it into a utensil for the blacksmith. Ad kan lashano. Uvilachora in lashon Rashi mendugdak. Seemingly, Rashi's language is not at all accurate. Why? Lefi sugat hashas besamuch daha demai dahave kli litzorfei zav maksha gemara b'gemara pshita lamai chazi. He says, if you look at the Gemara later, the Gemara doesn't talk about, the issue is that you're making into a kli. The Gemara says the reason you can't, in the end of the day, according to the Gemara, why can't you make the coal? So the Gemara explains that you're using it for what? For the bathhouses, not for the blacksmith. Right? That's what the Gemara explains the issue with the coal is. So where does Rashi come off to telling me that I'm talking about making a coal for the blacksmith? V'im came the pshito the havi matzi Rashi the farish the havi kli lahach milta gufa le'olarion. Rashi should just quote the reason that's in the Gemara. Why is Rashi bringing a whole blacksmith? Mandakar Shmei, who mentioned anything about blacksmith? It's a good kasha, no? So Pnei Yeshua answers, "Va'nira b'zeh b'kavanat Rashi." He thinks that Rashi's intent is as such. Di lo havi chazi ela le'olarion l'chud akati lo dami l'kli u'lemataken mana. If the reason it can't be the reason is only using it for heating up water by the bathhouses, because that's not really mitaken kli. That's not really what the coal is made into a kli. It has a use, but it's not. It doesn't become a kli. That it has a real function to do things with it. Really, the real function of the kli of the coal is to use it for the blacksmiths. The imkain dami shaper the kli. That's what really makes it into a kli. Mishum hachi asru chachamim afilu lemosran le'olarian mishum de mifsi kimetakin mana bekishaosa pachamin letzorchei zav. So the Pnei Yeshua explains the real reason, according to Rashi, why they made the isser was because of the blacksmiths. That's what makes it into a kli. But because that's usher, it also became prohibited to use it for the water. It also became prohibited to use it for the water because it's nichsi kimetakin. It looks like you're making it into a kli. What type of kli? The kli for the blacksmiths.
So the isser is metakin the kli, but for that person is really not metakin a kli. It's sort of like a gzera on the possibility. So it's not really metakin the kli. It's more like utachol or something like that.
Right. So good. So it comes out good. Let's say it like that. It comes out to Rashi. Really, it depends. If you make the actual coal for the blacksmith, so then you're metakin kli. And if you make it for the bathhouse, then it's not really metakin kli, but it's mixi kimetakin kli. It's one step removed. It kind of just looks like it, and therefore they made a gzera.
So because that's a more consistent in this parak talking about either marasayin or the chol and stuff like that. I think it fits better, that explanation, than suddenly to have a gzera, which they really didn't talk very much, a gzera to rabbanan or something like that here, in most of the stuff that we learned so far.
Right. That definitely fits in with a lot of the themes in this parak of other derabbanans they did to protect the spirit of Yom Tov.
Right.
Okay, so it's a nice Pnei Yeshua. It's a good question that kind of slips on the radar if you don't think about it for too long. But there's a little bit of an issue. And I guess this comes to the Litvaks and the Hasidim. Okay, why so? Because there's a Gemara earlier in Beitza. I don't know if you guys remember this from 8 years ago. The Mishnah says in source number, what is this? Should be source number phantom 2.5. Gemara says in Daf Yud Zayin. Gemara says the Mishnah says Chaliyot achar Shabbat Beit Shammai omrim matbilin et hakol milifnei Shabbat ubeit Hillel omrim kelim milifnei Shabbat v'adam b'Shabbat. So the whole question is if you have Yom Tov that falls out after Shabbat, and we're talking about in the Mishnah, so we're talking about the time of the Mikdash, and you have a lot of things that are tamei, and you need them to be tahor for Yom Tov, right? Where it's Yom Tov, there's Aliyah Regel, people have karbanos, they're going to be in the Mikdash, so a lot of things have to be tahor. So the question is on Shabbat, which is Erev Yom Tov, can you go ahead and bring it to the mikveh to mitaher, both kelim, including clothing, actual dishes, and people? So the machloket Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Okay. Gemara says kuli ama mihat kli b'Shabbat lo. Everybody seems to say that the kli you can't do on Shabbat, right? Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. What was the machloket? Beit Shammai says you can't do a kli or a person on Shabbat, and Beit Hillel says the kelim you have to do before Shabbat, but a person you could do on Shabbat. Beit Hillel is meka when it comes to a person on Shabbat. So the Gemara says, one second. Everybody agrees that the kli you can't do on Shabbat. My time, why not? What's the problem with the kli? Bringing it to the mikvah. So Rava Amar mipnei shenira kimitakin kli. It appears like you're fixing the kli. It was in a status of impurity. You couldn't use it. Now it's in a status of purity. It's not really fixing it. You haven't changed any physically to it, but the I guess the spiritual, the metaphysical aspect of the kli has changed, and it's kimitakin kli. Right? So you can't take a kli to the mikvah on Shabbat. So then Gemara says, one second, if that's the whole case, the issue is kimitakin kli, nira kimitakin kli, it looks like you're fixing the kli. Yihachi adam nami. A person also, when he goes to the mikvah, you're also fixing him. He was tamei, and now he's tahor, right? So the Gemara answers, no, adam nira kemekar. For a person, it doesn't really look like he's fixing himself. It just looks like he's cooling off. You ask a guy, what's he doing? He say, I'm just going for a little swim. I'm not, nothing. How do you know he's going to the mikveh? He's just going for a swim. Gemara says,
these kelim became tamei on Yom Tov or Shabbos, or before.
Even I don't think it makes it. For argument's sake, let's say before. If it happened on, something in the back of my mind is telling me that there's a discussion about that. If it happened on Shabbat and you couldn't have done it before, I think maybe that's also prohibited, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's assume for argument's sake that it's before. It happened before. So the Gemara says, Hatenach mayim yafim. Okay, that's a great answer if you're talking about nice clean water. Mayim ra'im ma'ikla meimar, but what about dirty water? And we're talking about the time of the Gemara, like their dirty water was like dirty water. Right? No one's going to go ahead and take a cool off in dirty water. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Pa'amim sha'adam ba b'sra v'rochitz afilu b'mishra. No, there are sometimes you come back and it's like a heat wave. It's like 45 degrees Celsius, and you are so hot that you'll even cool down in dirty water. So Tenach b'yamot hachama. Okay, great answer if you're talking about in the summer. B'yamot hagishamim in the rainy season, in the winter, ma'ikla meimar. Why would you're going to tell me the person's dipping in dirty water? It looks like he's cooling off. What is it? What could it possibly be? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Pamim sh'adam ba min hasadeh menuchlach betit ubitzoa v'rochitz afilu b'yamot hagishamim. Now, a person, even in the winter, he's covered in mud and dirt and all other types of bad stuff, and he'll wash off even in dirty water. So therefore, in basically the bottom line of this Gemara, and it becomes an important Gemara, is that nira kimitakin kli doesn't apply. The issur of nira kimitakin kli doesn't apply if it doesn't actually necessarily look like a person is mitakin anything. Right? If you can somehow explain it that he's doing something else that's totally permissible, like the guy's not going to the mikvah, he's just cooling off. So then it would be permissible. Then it would be permissible. Okay, so how does this? Why is this an issue for what we were talking about? Why is this an issue for the Pnei Yeshua? Pnei Yeshua said the basis of the reason you can't make the coals is because for the blacksmith. That's you're making a kli, right? And because of that, you can't also make it for the bathhouses because it mixi kimitakin, it near kimitakin. It looks like you're making it. You're making a kli for the blacksmith. Doesn't this go against the Gemara we just read in Yud Zayin? Should be the opposite. Because it looks like you're making the coal for the bathhouse, it's mutter. The problem of nira kimitaken, the prohibition, is only when it looks like it's actually nira kimitaken. But if there's a way to explain it that you're doing it beheter, so then it doesn't apply.
And the heter is to go into to bathe yourself in the water or whatever, right? Is that
right.
what you're saying?
Right. Meaning if the mishna is at the time where you were allowed to go to the bathhouse in order to go ahead and sweat, so then why is it a problem to go ahead and make a coal? You're doing it for a permitted reason, no? Mixing kimitakin shouldn't be a problem because it's mixing kaheter.
And can you say this is before the Xera and after the Xera?
Which is before and after?
The one where the Yasser, there was after the Xera. The one before, then they were allowed to do it.
I don't know. My point is, the Pnei Yeshua's answer, I don't see why mixing kimitakin should be an issue at all when the Gemara in Beitza says earlier that anytime you can explain it as not mitakin, we don't say mixing kimitakin. So, by the way, this is where the issue with the mitnagdim and the chasidim come in, right? The whole question is can you say nira kimekar nowadays? Can you say, oh, it looks like the guy's just cooling off? Why do I say nowadays? Because once you have the minhag that developed in Ashkenaz not to bathe in cold water, so there is no nira kimekar anymore, perhaps. Right? There is no nira kamekar because no one does it. The only reason he could be going to the mikvah or into the body of water is because of a mikvah. So the Hasidim say, it's not a problem, it's very important, and the mitnagdim are a little more hesitant because of this makeup, right? The custom of not bathing in cold water is that does that override this? Will that nullify this nira kamekar?
But you do allow women to go to the mikvah.
Excellent. So when everyone agrees when it comes to a woman going to the mikvah, so we're not going to let a situation where it's a woman going to the mikvah bismana in the proper time is a tefillas mitzvah. So that's not going to override. That's not the minhag is not going to override that. That everyone agrees to. So they do make a distinction between women and men.
Yeah, because as opposed to today where there's really no tumah and tara anymore, and therefore there's no mitzvah involved, at least according to Misnagdim, going to mikvah.
Right. So that also comes in. Right? Even when the men go to the mikvah, it's not really, it's not we're not getting a tumas mace here or anything like that. All we're doing is because of tumas of Tumas Keri, of Xeret Ezra, of seed or whatnot, that a person had an emission. So therefore he become tamei just in terms of divrei Torah and tefillah. But nobody's really machmir on that nowadays in any case, right? A man's mikvah standard man's mikvah is not, actually I have no idea what is going on in Toronto, but in Israel, the standard men's mikvah is not kosher for a woman. A man's mikvah is basically just a big, almost like a big bathtub in a certain sense.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know what the men's mikvahs in Toronto are like. I
think
they're the same as the women's mikvahs. No, they just use it at a different time.
Yeah, two things. My grandfather went to Pressburg in yeshiva, and that was a Chassam Sofer, right? And they were Ashkenaz, and he went to the mikveh, so they kicked him out of the base medrash on Shabbos because he went. And number two, we thank the Aruch HaShulchan for allowing women to have a haisa mikveh, to have a warm mikveh.
Oh, okay, good. Whoa. We'll talk about right. Okay, we'll talk about heating up for. Oh, there's so much to talk about here, right? Absolutely. The whole discussion of women have to. I can't not mention it. There's a tshuva. Maybe I mentioned it already. There's a tshuva of the Noda B'Yehuda. It appears in both Hilchot Shabbat and Hilchot Nida. It's a crazy shaila. Why does it appear both in Hilchot Shabbat and Hilchot Nida? Because it's a double shaila. It's both a Hilchot Shabbat shaila and a Hilchot Nida question. The Noda B'Yehuda was asked if a woman can't just go to the mikvah without anyone seeing. She has to have the balanit there. Basically, the point of the balanit is to make sure that her hair goes underneath the water. Because if even one strand of hair doesn't go under the water, then she hasn't really gone to the mikvah. So classically, either a balanit does it, somebody just to make sure that it goes under, can see from outside, or they wrap their hair up if in certain situations. Anyways, so the question was, can the husband go with her? She has to go to the lake to go ahead and tovel on Shabbat. The question was, can the husband be the balanit? Can he watch her go to the mikvah? That was question number one. Number two, it was, can he break the ice on top of the lake? Is that an issue of soter on Shabbat, or bona, making a hole in the ground? If you pause and think about it, that's how cold the waters were, and they were going into. Right, we're talking about literally ice cold water. Right, different generation. Okay, so I don't have a good answer for the Pnei Yeshua. I think it's a little bit of a difficulty. I don't know why by the coals you would say one way. When it comes to Tfilat Adam, you'd say differently. That's really just a side point. The main issue, which I wanted to now get into with 22 minutes left, is 1 second. Why are we talking about a Siyat Kli? There's a bigger issue at hand here. What should be the problem with making a coal? Look what the Ran says. The way the Ran explains, right? The Ran says Einosin Pachmin. You know why? Mishum Mechabe, you're extinguishing. That is a melacha. You can't just go ahead and extinguish things on Yom Tov. So that's why, right? And that's why the Gemara says, Pshita, of course you can't do it. Why would you think you can go ahead and do it? Right? And the Prima Gadim asked this question. He says, Li ha'ani yesh bekan ksat safek. I'm, my poor mind, I don't understand anything here. Ki asita pachamim yodu shemechabe. You make a call, of course you're extinguishing. Vadai, v'shofech alei mayim. You have to pour water on it. There's a whole process in making a coal, and you extinguish. V'maylo perish Rashi zal came to Mishnah. Why doesn't Rashi say that? Why is he talking about making a kli for the blacksmith? Maybe you want to say, because the Mishnah is dealing with asiyat kli. That's like the theme of the Mishnah. It's the motto. So he says, fine, forget Rashi. Kasha la Mishnah. Why does the Mishnah talk about kli? The Mishnah should talk about mechabe. He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand why mechabe got lost in the shuffle here.
But you're not really extinguishing it.
Why not?
It doesn't go out.
When you make it doesn't go out?
No, because it's
you're diminishing it.
Yeah, you're diminishing.
Is that the issue?
Right,
but it's not going out.
So even diminishing even a little bit is still considered mechabe. We see that there's a Gemara elsewhere earlier in Beitza that talks about removing oil, mistapik shemen min haner. You can't go ahead and take out oil from the fire, right? Machlokes Rishonim, what it exactly means, what exactly the mitzvah is. But some of the Rishonim explain is because Tosfot, I believe, it explains that when you take out some of the oil, so it dims a little bit, and that's considered mechabe. Even causing it to dim a little bit is mechabe.
Okay.
And that's talking about one flame, right? We're talking about a coal where there are different parts of it are lit. So seemingly there should be an issue of mechabe. So why doesn't Rashi say mechabe? That's our question. Okay. I'll kind of lay out where I think this is going to go. I think there is a fundamental machloket rishonim if mechabe is a melacha which is permissible on Yom Tov or not.
Isn't it Pasik Resha or Dovishal in Iskaven?
Why?
Well, because your intent is not to distinguish the coal, it's basically just to heat up the steam.
No, well, no, we're not talking about when you put it in the water to heat up the bath. We're talking about the actual making of the coal, right? They used to make a coal. They used to light something. They used to get black and red hot, and then they would quickly they would extinguish it, and then it would be used later on, even after it was cooled down. It would be used later on in other fires to go ahead and maintain a heat, similar to how like our coals that you buy for a barbecue.
So in terms of today, for example, with the sauna, you throw water on it to heat it up, or create steam.
Right. So we're not talking about that part. That would be, we're going to talk about Gemaras that deal with similar type of issues. That's already using the coal to create steam. We're talking, the Mishnah is talking about making the coal at the beginning, in the factory, so to speak. Okay. So I think it's fundamentally, we'll see is a machloket rishon and whether machaba is a melacha, which is permissible on Yom Tov. And what we're going to see is actually dependent on a girsa. So let's, okay, so Gemara earlier in Beitza, lots of Beitza today. Ibailahu, mahu la'ashen. The Gemara says, has a question, la'ashen. What's la'ashen? Not smoking, but Rashi explains, perut ba'ashan, ba'ashen b'samim, l'kot tam abosem. So what they used to do is they used to smoke fruit. How would they do that? They would put spices on top of they would sprinkle spices on top of a coal, and it would burn, and the smoke from the spices, the incense, would go into the fruit. They used to do it with fruits. They used to do it with clothing. They used to do it with a lot of stuff to kind of give it a smell. So Gemara says, can you do this on Yom Tov? Is that all right? So Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav Aser. The Shmuel Amar Mutter. Machloket Rav and Shmuel. Rav says Aser, Shmuel says Mutter. Rav Huna Amar Aser. Mibnei Shemachabel. Rav Huna says, what do you mean? When you throw the spices, the incense on the coal, you're extinguishing them a little bit. So Amar le Rav Nachman, v'nei mar mepnei ma'avir. Why are you talking about mechabe? You're also igniting the spices. There's ma'avir also included. So Amar le t'chleto mechabe v'sofu ma'avir. You're right, einachanami. There's also the issue of igniting, but first, I'm talking about what happens first. It's already going to be usher just by throwing it because there's going to be extinguishing first, and then there's going to be ma'avir. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda. Al gabi gachelet asr, al gabi cheres mutter. So it depends. Rabbi Yehuda says if you're going to do it on top of a coal, so then it's going to be prohibited because of the machabe and the ma'avir issues. But if it's on gabi cheres, if it's just on a element that was heated from the heat, but it itself is not considered fire, like a piece of shards or that just got really hot, so then it would be mutter. Rava comes along. Rava says, Amar Rav Amar. Al gabi gachelet nami mutter. Gachelet is also going to be permissible. Why? Midi dahavi al basra gomri, because it's just like putting meat on top of the coals. You're just putting a meat on top of the coals. What does that mean? What's going on here? So that's actually from another Gemara, which we're going to look at. But Rashi says, Rav Amar al gabi gachelet nami mutter kishmuel the ochel nefesh. Hu asum perot zeh v'shaveh l'chol nefesh. So the way that Rashi explains the Gemara is that Rava holds, you know why it's mutter? Because all the melachos that are involved here are permissible. Ma'avir is going to be permissible on Yom Tov. Mechaba, extinguishing, is going to be permissible on Yom Tov. Why? Because it's a davar shaveh v'chol nefesh. It's something which is, is it's hard to translate. Is something that most people do, or most people should do, and therefore it's something that's permissible on Yom Tov. Okay, so it seems from here, according to Rashi, that mechabe, if it's done for ochel nefesh, is totally permissible. It's just a bit of a chiddush to say extinguishing a flame is permissible for ochel nefesh, based on everything that we spoke about previously of how you categorized melachas ochel nefesh. So mechabe, unclear why that should fit in. What's this Gemara of Bisra Agumri. So that's actually Gemara in Shabbat on Kuf Lamed Daled. The Gemara here in source number 7 says as such: Tanu Rabbanan, ein misanin et achardal bisanenet shalo, ve'ein mamtikin oto begachelet. So I'll be honest, I don't know how they used to make mustard back in the day, but seemingly it involved some type of separating process, and seemingly it involved sweetening it or taking away the bitter taste of it by putting it on a hot coal. So says the Gemara, or says the Mishnah. Okay, if anybody has any historical knowledge of that, culinary knowledge, I'm happy to hear.
I just know about Heinz. That's all.
Exactly. Okay, peaches come from a can. They were put there by a man. So Amarle Abaye the Rav Yosef. Abaye says to Rav Yosef, mishna mahaditnan. Why is this different? Why is this whole din of chardal, of the mustard, different than the following Mishnah? Note in Beitza minasanenet besanenet shel chardal. You can go ahead and you can do borer. You can separate the egg, the yolk, and the white, using the sieve, the separator of the chardal, of the mustard. So why is that okay? With mustard, it's not, but egg, it's okay. So Amar Le, hatam lo mixi kaborer. What do you mean? That's borer. It's like you can see it. They're totally separate. That's not a mixture. It doesn't look like borer. It's all good. Hacha mixi kaborer. But when you're using with the mustards, the mustard seeds are very small. It's considered a mixture, so therefore it's a problem. Okay, ein mamtikin oto begachelet. Mishnah had said, and you can't go ahead and sweeten it, take away the bitterness with the fire. Vatanya. Oh, but we learned in a Beitza mamtikin oto begachelet that you can do it. So which is it? Lo kasha, kan begachelet shel matech et kan begachelet shel eitz. It depends. What are you sweetening it on? Where's the heat source? If it's a metal that was heated, so then it's going to be permissible. If it's wood, then it's not going to be permissible. Why? What's the difference? What's the difference between wood and metal? Why would one be permitted and one not?
Maybe there's no mechaber by metal.
Exactly. There's no mechaber by metal. There's not. It's just hot. There's no fire. It's just a hot piece of metal. But by wood, you're going to cause it to extinguish. So. Amarle Abaye the Rav Yosef, Umay Shnami Bisra Agmuri. Why is this different than meat? Meat you're allowed to go ahead and put on the fire, seemingly even gachelet shel eitz, right? You're allowed to put even on the fire of wood. So Amarle Hatam lo efshar, hacha efshar. There lo efshar, hacha efshar. What does that mean? There by the meat, lo efshar, hacha efshar. Here by the mustard, it's efshar. By the meat, it's lo efshar. What does that mean?
Rashi explains it.
Right. So Rashi helps us fill in the blank. Right. He says, mishna mibisra agmure. Why is it different than meat? Shitzolim b'yom tov v'afal gav de mechabe. And it does extinguish. So he says, lo efshar letzlot me'etmo de b'yoma shvicha shavchei tvei. This goes back to actually Shita's Rashi that we learned in the other sugya. Rashi makes a distinction whether is this something I could have done equally before Yom Tov or not. So with meat, you're going to tell me heating up a steak from 30 hours ago is the same thing as taking it right off the grill? Come on, you've never had a barbecue. By meat, lo efshar. It's not the same quality as if I make it yesterday, then I would have made it today. The shvicha, the shavchei tvei, it's greater, it's more special today. Aval chardal efshar me'etmol. I could have easily made mustard yesterday. It's not going to lose any type of taste, and therefore, says Rashi, mechabe is fundamentally permissible, but only when lo efshar. It's dealing with something that I could not have done the day before. Right. So here we see from Rashi, the mechabe fundamentally is permissible on Yom Tov. Says the Rif a little differently. What does the Rif say? Rif says like this. He's explaining the Gemara, the previous Gemara, the Gemara about the fruit, about smoking the fruit. he says like this: Ibailu ma'ula Hashem perot ma'ula Hashem et perot kedilach shiran la'achila. You want to go ahead and smoke them to make them now good for eating. I assume he's not necessarily talking about like apples and pears. He's talking about, I don't know, potatoes and things that you have that aren't good yet. Unless
Not potatoes.
sorry,
Definitely not potatoes.
not potatoes, right? Not potatoes.
Probably gourds.
Gourds, radishes. I don't know what they ate. It's hard to imagine a world without potatoes and ketchup. I don't know how they lived. But you know what? It's a good thing that they didn't have one without the other, because it'd be meaningless. What's a potato without a ketchup? So Amar Rav Yehuda, Agabi gachelet asur mipnei shu mechabe, Agabi cheres mutter. Right, just quoting the Gemara, the machloket, the difference between gachelet and cheres. Basikna Rava Amar agachelet nami mutter midi dahavi abisra agmuri. So Rava said no, gachelet also going to be why? It's just like the meat. What does it mean? It's just like the meat. We see elsewhere also that if it's like a bisra agmuri, it's like the meat, and it's kind of hein chilchata garsina. And this is the hein chilchata. This is the halacha garsina mepek Rabbi Elazar. That's our Gemara in Shabbat. What does it say there? Pay attention to what he says now. Sorry, that's not our Gemara. There's Omar im lo evi kli l'chuli tanu rabbanan ein misanin echadavai. It's our Gemara. The Gemara, as we said, you can't go ahead and sweeten down the gachelet. But said the Gemara, wait a second, we have a Beitza that says you can do it. So the Gemara made the distinction between wood and metal. So Amar Abaye, the Rav Yosef, my shnami bisra agmure. What's the difference between meat that even on wood it's okay? Says the Gemara, according to the Rif, Amar le hatam leika kiboy hacha ika kiboy. The Rif had a different girsa. The Rif's girsa is the reason that meat is okay is because you are not extinguishing the fire. Why are you not extinguishing the fire?
Because of the juices, no? The juices add to it? I don't know. Why wouldn't you extinguish the fire?
The juices add to it. So okay, good. Juices add to it. So at the Ran, we won't go into the Ramban, the Milchamot, but I think the difference is as how you're making it. Right? You go ahead and whether it's the spices that you're throwing on the coals or the mustard, I assume it's the same thing. I think that's going directly on the coals. Right? And when it goes directly on the coals, then it goes ahead and extinguishes. But the meat, it's not going directly on the coals. It's above. It's on some type of rack. Right? So oxygen is always coming to it. You're not smothering the coals. And in fact, anybody who makes hamburgers or a nice fat piece of meat on the grill knows that if anything, you're making the coals light even more, right?
So does he have a proof for that, or is just simply that's how he sees meat being done, or is this something that he gets from a Gemara or something like that?
So the thing is that's his girsa. He has a different girsa in the Gemara.
Right.
Our
Right.
girsa, the girsa that we have,
Doesn't say that, right?
yeah, the girsa that we have. We'll go back to it says hatam lo efshar hacha efshar. Sorry. It actually appears twice in the Gemara, but by Bisra Gmuri it says hatam lo efshar hacha efshar. That's what we have. The Rif though doesn't have that. The Rif has hatam leika kiboy hacha ika kiboy. Which is the original girsa? Which is the correct one? Hard to tell. It's not really fair. Sorry.
According to the Rif, kiboy and yontif, even for ochel nefesh, is usher.
Yeah, what comes out according to the Rif, ochel nefesh, kiboy for ochel nefesh on Shabbat, on Yom Tov, even for ochel nefesh is going to be aser. It's going to be aser, and it's not just the Rif; it's his whole Beit Midrash, right? It's the Rif, it's the Ramban, which we don't have time to look in, and it's the Ran. They all come from the same Beit Midrash, more or less, and they all say, we saw the Ran previously on our Gemara, and our Sukkah, he says, Enosim Pachamim Mishum Mechabe. Right? Because Mechabe is prohibited on Yom Tov. Right? All based on, seemingly, this girsa, I don't think it's all based on this, but the girsa definitely fuels the flames of their shitos, so to speak. Whether machabe is going to be permissible or not. Halacha lemaisa. So how do we paskin about machabe and Yom Tov?
Well, there are those that except there's a halacha sometimes that you can turn down the fire on a stove if you feel that the food is going to burn.
Right. So right. Excellent. So it's actually it's not in the Rishonim, in the poskim, it's not 100% clear. It seems from the Shulchan Aruch that it's prohibited. The Ramah comes along, and he says, well, not everyone agrees to that. If it's for food, then it might be okay. However, so long as there's no other way, and this is where the hesitance comes in. Meaning, really, the way that we paskin is that mechabe is permissible so long as there's no other way to do it. For instance, let's say and this is Shmir Shabbat writes, I believe they all write this, that let's say I have a flame lit, and I if I don't need the flame anymore, you know what? Let me leave with gas the stove away. Let's leave that for a second. That becomes a little more. Let's say I have a real fire pit going, and I was roasting marshmallows or hot dogs, whatever, and I'm done with the fire. So to go ahead and extinguish the fire, if I don't need it anymore, then that's a problem, right? There's the mechabe there isn't l'tzorach ochel nefesh. It's just because I don't want the fire anymore. But let's say I want to dim the flames. I want to put it out a little bit because I'm cooking. I was roasting hot dogs. Now I want to cook a full chicken, a turkey. I'm going to throw a whole turkey in tinfoil in the fire, and I don't want such a strong flame. So if I need to go ahead and lower the flames for the purpose of cooking, so then that would be the tzorach ochel nefesh. The only qualification that the Ramah brings down is that this is only if I can't start a new fire because of this machloket rishonim. If, says the Ramah, I can easily just as well start a new fire, which is of lower heat, and that'll serve my purposes all the same. So then I got to start a new fire, and I'm not allowed to go ahead and do machaba on this one. Now you take that and you translate it practically to our modern kitchens. Let's say when you have it depends on how modern your kitchen is, but let's say you have a gas stove top, and you had making pasta on Yom Tov, and you had it on high. So can you go ahead and lower the flame now that you don't need it anymore? If you say it's just like the regular fire in the fire pit, so if I don't need it anymore, I'm not allowed to do mechabe. Right? And you say, oh, well, maybe I want to cook something, I want to do a little harama, I want to do a little trick. And I say, well, I need it to cook something on a much lower level flame. I want to make, boil water slowly. Right? So then the Ramah would say, so light a new fire. Right? On face value, that's how it might look out. Why I say on face value is because it's not so clear that our stovetops, there really is mechabe. Why do I say it's not mechabe when I lower the gas?
Gas is continuing anyways, right?
Sorry?
The gas is continuing anyways.
It's right. There's a gas. There's a source of the fuel constantly coming in.
Right. The source is all down. Right.
Right. Perhaps what I'm doing is I'm not mechabe. I'm just lowering the intake of fuel, which will, in a sense, by grama, secondarily cause the flame to lower. But I'm not extinguishing anything. I'm just limiting how much gas can actually come in. Not so simple. There's a big Rav Moshe maybe says that's okay. He doesn't. Rav Tendler argues that he says it okay. Anyways,
there's a bigger issue which had Rav Zirin this year about whether you're allowed to turn off lights on Yom Tov or Einik Shabbos, Einik Yom Tov, and this also. But that's a different share.
Right, but it very much related.
Right.
Right. Same idea is perhaps I'm not really doing anything there. I'm just stopping the flow of the source, whether it's electrons or gas.
Right.
Right. So it's to go ahead and apply a lot of the dinim of mechabe to our modern kitchens is a little difficult. Also, if you have gas stovetops, a lot of people are moving away from that. Okay. Basically, that is our sugya. We saw Rashi on the Mishnah says the issue is making a kli for the blacksmiths. The Gemara seems to say the reason is because is that you can't make it for not the blacksmiths but for the bathhouses. We saw the Pnei Yeshua who raised the issue. Why does Rashi give a different reason altogether when the Gemara says something already? And we explained, the Pnei Yeshua explained that if it was just for the reason of the Gemara, then that wouldn't really be Kimatakin Kli at all. It's really the reason is the blacksmith, and they prohibited also to the bath attendants because it looks like you're making it for an asiyas kli for the blacksmith. We questioned that from the Gemara earlier in Beitza, that a person can go to the mikvah back in the day before the minhag at least of not using cold water. A person can go to the mikvah and there's no issue of mitaking. It's near a mitaking kli because it looks like he's just going in for a cool dip. And so how does that fit with Pnei Yeshua? We left that as a question, and we raised the question of why Rashi doesn't say mechabe. The Ran says the issue here is mechabe of extinguishing, and we said that seems to be a machloket rishonim between the Beit Midrash of the Ramban and the Rif and the Ran versus Rashi based on a girsa. Is mechabe fundamentally something which is permissible on Yom Tov for Ochel Nefesh or not? Rashi seems to say that it is totally permissible, and therefore he doesn't mention it in the Mishnah. And the Ran says it's problematic, all stemming back to the girsa that the Rif has in the Gemara on Shabbat. Okay. Wonderful.
Very
good. Interesting.
Go after you guys. Shabbat
See you
shalom.
next week.
Shabbat shalom.
Get in the Chodesh.
Chodesh Tov. Chodesh Tov.